How are we going to find a way out?
Labyrinthine tunnels, poltergeists and human sacrifice await the Most Haunted team as we travel to Kent. And this week I've brought my team to Kent and a labyrinth of tunnels rich with stories of phantoms, murder and human sacrifice. Welcome to Most Haunted and Chislehurst Caves. The man-made caves run for miles and could be over 8,000 years old, connected with early man, Saxons and Romans who all found use for the chalk and flint quarried there. The caves contain an ancient Druid temple complete with sacrificial altars. During both World Wars the caves were put to use, in the first to store ammunition and during the second as a massive air raid shelter. By the 1960s it was a popular live music venue, seeing performances from Jimi Hendrix and David Bowie. However, what drew the attention of the Most Haunted team were the myriad stories of hauntings and of course, the challenge. Usually held on Halloween, it was a contest to see which foolhardy individuals could spend an entire night alone in the caves. Only one person survived that test and swore he would not repeat the experience ever again. Given the thousands of years of what Chislehurst has endured, the Most Haunted team felt that we would need 2 nights of investigation to make some sense of this amazingly rich history. Now, no one has spent the night down here since 1985, not because of the cold and less than comfortable surroundings, but because these tunnels have claimed many lives through the years. At least one person was scared to death down here, with many more being so affected the owners just closed them down after dark. But with around 22 miles of tunnels, we will not just be spending one night, we hope to manage 2. During World War II, Chislehurst Caves became home to thousands of people fleeing the London Blitz. Each night up to 15,000 people came here seeking refuge in what became the largest air raid shelter outside of the city. 2 people died in the caves during this time, but no one knows how or why. It's believed that they haunt this area, sometimes appearing as full apparitions and sometimes as dark mists. People spent so much time down here that a hospital unit was set up to treat the sick and the needy. Men, women and children would have filled these makeshift beds, and although there are no records to say how many actually died here, it's believed that some never left. The mannequins here are said to move on their own. Dark shapes have been seen swaying from side to side, and the ghostly figure of a man dressed in rags crouches in the corners moaning, and the sounds of children laughing, playing and crying have all been heard around this whole area. Just about everywhere here has a ghost story, and this stretch of tunnel is no exception. It's reported that a cavalier has been seen near the scene of his death and endlessly wandering around the caves. The apparition of a strange-looking old lady has been witnessed floating around this area, and a mischievous poltergeist likes to throw objects at unsuspecting guests. What more could historian Leslie Smith tell us of the cave's amazing history?
We shouldn't really call this Chislehurst Caves, but Chislehurst Mines, because that's what we're standing in. People have been mining here for chalk and flint, and it should be measured really not in centuries, but in thousands of years. We've got over 20 miles of tunnels here. In the war years, 15,000 people here escaping from the Blitz, a hospital here, a church here. When they were here, people were bound to have lived and died. After the war, a priest came down here. It's thought to be a priest, a young man, and broke in. He was lost within this 22 miles of caves, but when he was found, quite near the entrance, he was naked and dead. And some say that he died of absolute fear. In fact, a doctor says he died of absolute fear. So is it any wonder that there was a £5 offered, a week's salary after the Second World War, for people who dare to come and spend a whole night here alone? We know of one, a policeman, who drew feverishly on the wall to keep himself occupied, but said he could hear deep, dark breathing behind him.
With a history stretching back into the very mists of time, I was intrigued to know how parapsychologist Dr. Kieran O'Keefe would make sense of the many stories connected with Chislehurst caves, and what physical phenomena he felt would impinge our ability to concentrate on the coming investigations.
Kieran, we've done investigations in caves before, and there are the very obvious questions that I could ask you, but I'm going to stay away from those. I want to concentrate really on some of the phenomena that's been witnessed here to do with World War II. Because for me it's amazing to think that 15,000 people would have lived down in these caves, all over 20 miles of them.
It is absolutely fantastic, and you get a feel for those people actually being down here when you walk around the World War II part, because of the mannequins and the beds and everything set up as it would have been. And it makes it a fantastic experience, but I think those things being there is a disadvantage to us during the investigation.
A lot of people have said that the mannequins that you just talked about, they've been witnessed moving on their own. What do you think about that?
I'm quite cynical about that. I'm also very cynical because when people talk about experiences with mannequins, I myself have been on an investigation and I've been spooked by a mannequin. So I know it's very easy to fall prey to the simple suggestion of what you think is a person standing there, and you think they're moving out of the corner of your eye, when in fact it's just a mannequin standing perfectly still.
We are the first group of people to spend the night down here since the 80s, because everybody else has been absolutely terrified by something. Some people have been driven mad. And really the prospect, knowing of its history, of us spending the night down here, the prospect of it is actually quite frightening.
I could understand how that could happen in an environment like this, where you've got miles and miles of caves. You've got a system where if you don't have torchlight and you have no other source of light, it's sensory deprivation. You're in a situation you cannot see what's in front of you. You're going to start seeing lights, that sort of thing. It can drive you crazy just thinking that there's somebody else down here and that there's a spirit presence. But you add to that the fact that somebody would then get lost. So they lose themselves. They start to get crazy, they don't want to be down here because they think there's a spirit, and then they get lost. And that's one thing about this particular place that is going to be tough to try and control for, or to try and be prepared for in the investigation. And I think that adds to any sort of hysteria or panic that somebody would have if they think that they've witnessed a spirit.
Kieran's warning of disorientation due to sensory deprivation and the tales of unseen phantoms enveloped the team with a feeling of dread for the impending investigation. Joined by guest medium and psychic artist Brian Shepherd, would our worst imaginings become reality over the coming hours?
Oh, what the heck was that?
That's the... What? No, I can feel something and I'm uneasy about it.
Lights of the
Oh
camera.
my God!
What?
Oh my God, someone's died here.
The Most Wanted team are investigating Chislehurst caves, deep beneath the pleasant Kent countryside. We've invited guest medium and psychic artist Brian Shepherd to join us, and we begin with a lit walk around. With the caves completely shut off from any form of natural light, this would be our